All right, what is up? Anthony with Bleacher Bums Gaming, and we are doing a stream today of our picking up our Deadball Diaries, and it has been a while since we did one of those. So today we're going to talk about the gentleman in this picture, probably the one of the most arguably famous photos of the Deadball era. And as you see here, this was a photograph of Ty Cobb stealing third base at Hilltop Park in a game against the Highlanders circa 1909. And this image was captured by Charles Conlon, who, of course, is one of the most prolific baseball photographers of all time. And the subject here is, who has perhaps the most famous backside in the history of baseball, is Jimmy Austin. And we're going to take a listen to the interview, Lawrence Ritter's interview of Jimmy Austin, which was done in advance of his book, Glory of Their Times, of course, one of the all-time classic baseball books. And focused on Jimmy. Jimmy is kind of an unknown player. Our first four segments of Deadball Diary featured players who are a lot more popular or better well known, at least today. And Austin still had a solid 18-year professional career, roughly, well, actually, if you count the fact that he played parts of seasons or got an at-bat in a season as late as 1929 at the age of 49. Technically almost an 18-year span in the major leagues, though of course his prime was 1909 to roughly 1920 with the New York Highlanders, which is who he played for in this picture here, and then later the St. Louis Browns. So we'll get into this. Jimmy Austin, born James Austin in Swansea, Wales in 1879. His father was a shipbuilder, and he came to the United States in 1885, basically looking for higher wages, to better support his family. And finally, in 1887, at the time that Jimmy would have been 8 years old, his father sent for the rest of the family. And just the logistics of that, doing that nowadays where, basically you could fly, in some cases, direct from England over to Cleveland, or at most two stops maybe. The logistics back then, obviously no telephone, definitely no electronic devices. So it would have basically entailed Austin's father writing a letter saying he was ready for the family to come over, which would take at minimum probably 2 to 3 weeks to get to England, waiting for the return letter, coordinating the passage to America from Wales, which would leave, basically depart from Southampton, England. That's where the majority of the New York to England cruises or ship journeys took place from. So that would entail getting by train to Southampton, getting on the ship. At that point, you spend over a week at sea. And again, coming from a working class family, not the best of conditions, cramped, probably very unsanitary. And getting to New York, then you would have to, probably would have the luxury of a telegraph at that point to coordinate the train trip from New York to Cleveland. So it would have been, I would say, possibly a 2-week ordeal from the time they left England to get here, which is a far cry from the conveniences of today. So once Jimmy Austin got to America, he didn't even play baseball or see a baseball game until he was 14 years old. He was interested in rugby, and once he discovered the game of baseball, did not want to or had no further interest to go back to rugby, and that was his love from that point on. And in his neighborhood in Franklin, Ohio, there was a neighborhood team, which was very common back at that time. And, a bunch of kids getting together and going to play other neighborhood teams, and basically just for bragging rights. Now, the interesting thing about his neighborhood team actually included Dode Paskert, who would also make the majors as a member of the Philadelphia Phillies, an outfielder. So just really honestly, to have two kids in the same neighborhood like that ended up going to the major leagues is actually pretty phenomenal. Paskert actually finished school, and he was had a 4-year apprenticeship as a machinist. And right before he was set to go and join that field of endeavor permanently, there was a strike, which at that point he had no job and needed money, and took up a offer to play in the Central League for a salary of 40 a week. That resulted eventually in Paskert coming with him as well at Austin's request. And both of them were picked up by the Atlanta Crackers of the Southern League. Dode Paskert went there, and Jimmy Austin, not liking the Atlanta Heat, chose to go elsewhere and ended up being sold to the Western League, to Omaha in the Western League, and where he caught the attention of the New York Highlanders manager, who brought him up, and the rest is history. So we're going to dive into this, and no more talking. We will let Jimmy Austin begin to tell his story in his own words, and of course, like we do with the other Deadball Diaries, interrupting and interjecting our thoughts as we go along.
Jimmy Austin. I interviewed Jimmy Austin in 1964 when he was 84 years old in Laguna Beach, California. That's near San Juan Capistrano, where the swallows come back every spring. He was born in Wales in 1879. When I say those years, I'm astonished. Jimmy was in the majors for 14 years, from 1909 to 1922. He was with the Yankees, and then spent most of his career in the big leagues with the St. Louis Browns. His rear end is the most famous rear end in the history of baseball.
And as we talked about, first of all, I want to welcome Bears Den 007, Mark Jones, and David Seslinski to the chat. Welcome, guys. Hope you enjoy this. So the other thing, kind of a sad thing, actually, like Lawrence Ritter mentioned, he interviewed Jimmy Austin when he was 84. Jimmy Austin, unfortunately, never lived to see the book published. He died shortly before it was released the next year at the age of 85. So, sad ending there, but again, you'll see Jimmy lived, in his mind, a good life and doesn't have any regrets. And just the fact that Ritter was able to capture this interview with him is, again, enough, I guess, to put his legacy, because, again, he's not a very well-known player from that era, but to put his legacy in print and also audio recording. So
the reason for that is Charles M. Conlon took a famous photo of Ty Cobb sliding into third base in 1910. It was against the Yankees, and Jimmy Austin was the Yankees' third baseman. And you see Jimmy Austin trying to grab the ball and put him out. He didn't succeed. And the only thing you see of Jimmy is his rear end. The most famous action photo in baseball history. And Jimmy Austin's rear end is a big part of it. Jimmy was a good friend of Babe Ruth's. And one of his fondest memories is every time Babe Ruth hit a home run against St. Louis, as he rounded third, he would give a wink or a salute. He gave a big grin and a wave to Jimmy Austin, and Jimmy never forgot that. It was one of his fondest memories of the years he played. Then he took me into the next room, and there he found a glove Babe Ruth had given him, which here, 40 years since it was given to him, he still treasured and had it in a place of honor in his home. And unfortunately, Jimmy died a year later in 1965 at the age of 85, and he never did get to see the book published.
You're a Welshman.
Yeah. Real quick, just about the fact that he had a glove and that Babe Ruth gave him. And I hear a lot of these stories, and a lot of these players in this book kept some type of memorabilia. And it's just interesting to me, curious to see where that glove ended up. Did it actually get sold in a yard sale, get thrown away? I would hope not. Is it with a collector? So yeah, it's at some point it would kind of be fun to try and, I don't know how you would track down a Jimmy Austin's Babe Ruth glove, but it would be fun to try just to see where that went to. But Jimmy's getting ready to speak, so we will get back and let him tell us about himself.
I was born in Swansea, Wales. My father was a shipbuilder in England. You see, in those days, they made wooden ships. Then they went to steel ships. My father came over here 2 years before us.
You were in the miners for 5 years.
Yeah. I was a sandlotter. Picked me up on the sandlot. And I was the kid. You know, you have to have somebody with a life on it to make you think you're looking like a ball club anyway.
Yeah.
And I had that energy. I had that. That's what kept me up there. It wasn't my hitting that's a cinch, because I was only a mediocre hitter. But I had a lot of go and good arm, good legs, you know, and lots of pep. Keep 'em alive.
Pepper Austin, right?
Yeah, that's the Stallings named me as soon as I hit the league. The Pepper Kid, he named me.
Oh, Stallings gave you that.
Yeah, he gave me that name. I never had it till I got to New York.
When you were a rookie with the Highlanders, how did they treat you then?
Oh, wonderful. I'll tell you how I got in there first.
Mhm.
I was on the coaching at first base for the first month.
You were coaching even though you were a rookie.
Yeah, they had me coaching at first base. And Kid Everfield playing third. And he hit my ball down the right field line that I know was a good foot fair. And I says, go on, Kid. Go on for two. Go for two. Of course, he could see the ball himself coming down the line. He rounded and he slid into second base, you know, safe. Tim Hurst was behind the plate, called it a foul. Kid got up, brushed himself off, and he went right through the pitcher's box from second base and started jabbing Tim in the belly. And the Tim took his mask and whack, right on his nose and his cheek, and skinned it all up. That put me in the game. He got suspended for 5 days and fined $50. Stallings says, Kid, you're playing third tomorrow. I went in there and they never got me out for the 2 years. I was there 1909, 1910. Now, Kid Everfield was, I guess he was the oldest on our club, see. And when he got in that rumpus and got kicked out and fined, I went in. Oh, I guess I played a couple of weeks. And we used upper and lower berths in those days in the train. So I was getting up in my berth. I had the upper berth. So he saw me going up there. Right, I'm up in there and he gathered me by the ankle and he jerked me down. He said, what are you doing up there, kid? I said, this is my berth. Well, you were playing every day. That ain't your berth. The hell it ain't. I said, I've had it ever since I've been in the club. I got it. And you're not going to have it anymore. He went to Tom Davis, our secretary. He says, put the kid down in the lower berth. He's pussing like hell out there. The kid is obvious.
Even though you were going to take his job away.
Yeah. They were always nice. As long as I was up there, I never found any crabs like that. And
So Kid Elberfield, his nickname was the Tabasco Kid. He is very well known for his temperament. If you see one of the other Deadball Diaries, he famously during a meal, I believe it was in spring training, the ball players who were not well regarded by large segments of society back in that day were not getting restaurant service, and Elberfield slammed a plate down on the floor, and of course that brought immediate tension from the waiters. The ball players got taken care of just to placate Elberfield and to stop any more basically outbursts by him. But yeah, he was a notorious brawler and umpire baiter back in the day. And the interesting thing, the upper and lower berths thing, back at that time, starters always got the lower berths because basically traveling by train, especially overnight train, the players in the upper berths got jostled quite a bit more, and it wasn't as easy to get a lot of rest in the upper berth. So despite the fact that, again, he took Elberfield's position after Elberfield got suspended and Kid never got it back, it just kind of does show that Elberfield did at least have some integrity as a ball player to recognize this. And he actually, I don't think Jimmy mentions it, but he said that he didn't care how Austin got a lower berth. He said even if he took his, meaning Elberfield's, he was going to get that lower berth. And so that's kind of cool that a player that, again, was not well liked by a lot of his peers back in that time kind of took Jimmy under his wing, and it speaks to how popular Jimmy Austin was, and he was a very popular player back in that time period. And I don't think you'd ever find anybody, or at least in my research, I've not found anybody that had anything but glowing comments about Jimmy. So we'll get back to the interview.
Now, you know where we played then those days? We were the Highlanders.
The Highlanders.
Way up on the end of Broadway, you could look from the stand down the Hudson River. We had Willie Keeler the first year in right field.
You played with Willie Keeler.
Well, that 1 year.
Yeah. Was he still pretty good?
He could loop them over the infield better than anybody in the world.
He was still...
But anywhere. He could pull them, push them, anything.
He was no kid anymore.
Oh, no, he was about two.
How big was he?
He was a little fella. He wasn't big as me, and I'm not too big, you know.
What kind of a person was Willie?
Oh, wonderful fella. He'd come to me, he said, Jim,
And just for comparison, Jimmy Austin was 5'7" and roughly 155 during his playing days. So when he's telling you Wee Willie Keeler is small, obviously I think Keeler checked in about 5'4" and 130. So that was the case there.
if I can help you in any way, I'd like to. When you said with your speed and everything, you ought to make a great ball player. You've got a great career ahead of you.
And he was a nice person.
Oh, wonderful. I tell you, we had Russ Ford.
Russ Ford was the spitball.
He wasn't exactly a spitter. He had something.
What was it? What did he do?
He had a piece of sandpaper on his belt right there, and he'd rub the ball on it. And he was a good pitcher. That ball would do a couple of tricks, you know. When I first joined the Highlanders, there was no clubhouses. We didn't have a clubhouse at the ballpark, anywhere. Never will forget one time we were in the Planters Hotel in St. Louis, and we had our meeting, and these was 5 miles out to the ballpark, and they had 4 horses on a tally-ho. And anyway, we discussed who was going to play. Well, somebody said, well, it's Lou Bardell today. Anyway, there's a saloon there on the opposite corner of the ballpark, and here comes Rube out of this door, this big double doors with a super of beer that high.
Coming out of the saloon.
He had this big super of beer holding up, waving. And somebody said, who said Rube was going to pitch today? Look at him there. And sure enough, we start the game, and here's old Rube pitching. I'll never will forget as long as I live. McAleer was the manager. And I hit one and hit the top of the right field wall. Old Rube, he was watching me running around the bases. I could see him, and he sat on his can, right on the rubber. McAleer, Jimmy McAleer yelled, come on in out of there, you didn't want to pitch anyhow. It took him out.
He fell down watching you go around the bases.
He fell out of his can.
He was a great pitcher.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was too, you know, yeah.
Oh.
So very much on point for Rube Waddell. It's funny, just about every player interviewed in this book that was a peer of Waddell's or played against him at some point, had a story about him, and of course they usually involved drinking in some way or another. And again, Waddell earning his nickname as the Southpaw, but just funny the fact that Waddell would often, and you know that was not an isolated incident, he would often show up late to ball games, come in well after the crowd had been seated with very little time to warm up, often coming directly from a saloon. And I wish, unfortunately, Waddell had lived long enough. He died in 1915 of influenza or severe pneumonia, I believe, after helping with flood victims to fill sandbags. But it would have been very interesting if there had been any recorded or saved video of Rube Waddell. Definitely would be a must listen to. And I do have his book, which is pretty solid and picks up a lot of the facts, and maybe do a Deadball diary on that someday. But Jimmy's ready to talk about Walter Johnson, the big train, so...
Yeah. You batted against Joe Wood in that year, 1912, when he was so good. Was he as fast as Johnson that year?
Well, he was pretty fast. I don't know, Walter had those long old arms, and he could breeze them in there. longest arms I ever saw in the guy. Boy, they were whips. He could whip that ball in the... But I'd rather bat against Walter than I would Joe Wood.
Why?
Well, because Walter was so damn careful. He was afraid he'd hit somebody.
Really?
Walter was too good a guy, you know. He was a swell guy. One day, he had us beat about 10-2 or something. He says to me, he says, here's one right in there. Let's see you hit it. Took me a fast one right in there, and I hit it over the right field fence. Laughed? He laughed all the time. I was going, he was one of those guys. Good guy, you know.
But on a cloudy day, you couldn't even see the ball coming in there.
Oh, geez, that day in St. Louis, I tell you, it was murder. One day we're playing down in St. Louis, and Walter's pitching. Then I got a ball. Tommy says, strike. And I looked around kind of quick like that, you know. He says, Jim, that was right in there. I says, I never saw it. You can't prove it by me.
You didn't see the ball come over at all?
Dad, by me, that's all.
Who was the best pitcher you ever batted against? Really the best?
I think Walter.
He was. He was smart as well as fast.
Oh, yes, he was. Well, for years, you know, they said, well, Walter don't have no curve. You know, he didn't need it. Towards the end, though, he developed a curve. Had a lot of stuff.
How would you compare Koufax's speed with Walter Johnson?
Oh, geez, that guy, yeah, he's got a lot of stuff. He really has. You take Grove, you know, he had a lot, too. But this Koufax, he must be a whiz. I think he's up there with Walter and that guy. You got to test him what he done, you know. He's the best of the day, I think.
You saw, I guess, play the two greatest first basemen that ever lived.
So he's going to talk about Hal Chase as one of them here. But again, another common thing that a lot of these players say about Walter Johnson. Despite his fearsome speed, and of the pitchers of that time, Johnson, Waddell, and before he hurt his shoulder at Noodles Hahn of Cincinnati, and of course Smokey Joe Wood later with the Red Sox, probably the four fastest pitchers of the Deadball era. And it's interesting to see Austin compare him to Koufax, and also puts into perspective a little bit of Johnson's speed. People over the course of history or time have tried to quantify Johnson's fastball, and by most accounts, it clocks in anywhere between 91 and 94 miles an hour based on being able to, parse out data. And I think he actually threw against a device that measured it at approximately 93 miles an hour, I believe. So that tells you Walter Johnson, for as fast as he was, and it speaks to the other pitchers of that era, would pretty much have an average fastball in today's major leagues. But when you're seeing low 80s, maybe mid 80s at the best from other pitchers, that 93, 94, of course, looks a lot quicker.
Sister and Chase.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Which was the best?
And I threw to both of them, many a ball.
Which was the best?
Sis could hit a longer ball, maybe, than Chase. But between you and I have to say Chase. And boy, he could cover that ground. He could do anything.
He was the best fielder of the two.
In my estimation.
Well, he couldn't hit with Sisler.
Well, he always hit. He could hit and run. He could do anything.
He didn't hit 400, though, either, did he?
Oh, it's just at 420 and 22. So you can't take anything away from either of them. They're both great. But you'd hear more about Chase if he'd been on the level. You know what he done, don't you? You know why they fired him out of the league? Got to gambling. Christy Matheson went down to Cincinnati to manage the club, and he got him down there. And Christy Matheson exposed him. And that was the last of Chase.
Yes.
He just ruined a great career. He's forgotten, you see.
Did he have any friends on the ball club? People who were close to him?
None on our club. And it's his own fault, too. One day somebody gave Jack Knight a good bat. You know, it just suited him, and he went along with it, and boy, he hit like a fool with it. Hal said, "You don't mind if I use your bat, do you, Jack?" And he said, "I'd rather you not, because it's the only one I got." Oh, he got mad and took it and slammed it up against the wall over there. And Hal was always doing that. If I had a good one, or if somebody else was going good with a bat, why, let me use your bat. See, he could get 1,000 bats himself, but he wanted the other guy who was hitting good. So he made enemies that way.
I want to ask you about this famous picture, Ty Cobb sliding.
So Hal Chase, and I actually did a complete vlog just on Hal Chase. It's in the vlog playlist. Probably 3 years ago. Again, universally praised and universally despised in baseball. Was involved in the 1919 White Sox fix by most accounts. Was accused of throwing games throughout his major league career, but always seemed to get another chance up until the point he kind of ran afoul of Christy Mathewson because he was such a great defensive player and a very competent hitter for the Deadball era. And Babe Ruth, actually, who of course played with Lou Gehrig, who is generally regarded by most people as one of the best first basemen of all time, actually put Chase ahead of Gehrig on his all-time baseball team. So that tells you testament to the skill of Hal Chase. And of course, the thing there with Chase is it wasn't if he could play and if he could perform, it was whether he chose to or not. And usually that involved some type of side bet he had on the game in question, usually again, which he was participating in.
Into third and knocking you up in the air.
Yeah. That's me. This is Ty Cobb. Look at his determination.
That's a famous picture.
Yes, yeah. Oh, they use that an awful lot.
Do you remember when that happened?
Yes. Cobb took this foot with his shoulder, see? But he was safe anyway.
Okay, now you were a third baseman and Cobb was on the bases a lot. Was he a fair or an unfair base runner?
He nicked me a couple of times, but it's my fault. I'm not blaming him. One day he's on first base and there's a ball hit the right field. So he comes all around and I stand there, nonchalant, as though nothing's happening, see. In the last minute, here comes the ball. And Ty slid in and I took it. And I swept his foot off the bag, and Tommy says, "You're out." Ty laying there on the ground, looked up at me, and he said, "Mister?" He said, "Mister, don't never do that no more." In his southern brogue. But he and I were pretty good friends. He's better off the field he is on. When he's out there in that ball game, look out. He's out to win. I saw him cut Jack Berry from there clear down. You see, Philadelphia and Detroit was fighting for a pennant, and they got nasty, and old Ty, he can get nasty. But off the field, he's a pretty good guy.
You don't talk about Ty Cobb with as much fondness as you talk about Babe Ruth, though, do you?
Oh, no. They've had a heart.
So again, talking about that picture, and very on brand with Ty Cobb, and 100% believe he did say that on the first to third story, and I love the imitation, mister. But definitely you could see Ty Cobb saying that. Ty Cobb had a tendency to take offense at anybody he felt wronged him or made him look less than the absolute best player on the field, and he would get upset at his teammates razzing other pitchers, in fact, because he felt that they would bear down harder on him. Notably among that was Walter Johnson. So Ty Cobb just was easily offended as a ball player, but it's just kind of the way he played the game and how much pride and arrogance he had in his ability as a ball player and the desire to win at all costs. Probably, arguably, one of the most competitive baseball players of all time, if not the most competitive.
He had a heart of gold. Good fellow, babe.
He was a friendly fellow.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. I've seen him stand for an hour and a half, signing cards with another. So I asked the babe, I said, "Baby, you got an old worn out glove. you can spare. He said, by God, I have, Jim. He came out with that. I said, well, this is the new one. I don't want this. I don't know one that you don't want. Take that.
This is Babe Ruth's glove.
Yeah.
I'll be. I've, this is a pretty valuable thing, one of Babe Ruth's gloves.
Yeah. Yeah, he just ready to break this thing in. It's practically brand new, you can see.
Yeah.
Of course, as we keep pounding, we got a pocket in there.
That looks like a little tiny thing compared to a glove today.
Yeah.
There's really no pocket in it.
No, not that. There would be later.
You look back, you saw Cobb, you saw Sisler, you saw Ruth.
Yeah,
Garrick. You saw Joe Jackson play a lot too, didn't you?
Oh, sure, yes. Joe.
One more quick note about that glove. So, Jimmy and his wife Josie were married for 45 years. She preceded him in death, and actually her illness was the reason he eventually got out of baseball. He was a coach at the time, but they had no children, so that makes it even more intriguing as to what happened with that glove when Jimmy Austin passed away. And with no, I don't know if there were relatives or whoever that oversaw that, but if everything was just sold through an estate sale, it's very possible that was either tossed or somebody did recognize that it had some value and took it or purchased it, and who knows what has happened to it since, whether or not they even knew it was Babe Ruth's glove. So again, interesting to speculate on that stuff, and would be really cool to find out where that glove ended up, one of the lost baseball treasures, if you will.
Right.
Was he as great a hitter as he?
Yeah.
They say he was a great
Yeah,
hitter.
he was great.
Even in that series in 1919, he hit .380.
Yeah.
Of course, he wasn't too smart. Evidently.
Oh, no, he wasn't. That's it. See, that's the trouble.
Bobby Wallace was a good shortstop then, still?
Oh, yeah, but he was failing, see. He was his legs. You see, the first thing that goes is your legs. Now, for instance, take Ty Cobb, old Spoke. Take Larry Lazarway. They could still hit, but hell. Oh, Larry, by the way, when he was managing Cleveland, he tried to get me 2 or 3 times. He always liked me. And he could comb him down that third base line like nobody's business. And he really could hit. Well, at the time you get those fast ones on a bad hop in between. So I just smell and let him hit me, then scramble around and throw him out. I said, you son of a bitch, next time I'm going to carry you out to left field. I'm going to hit it so hard.
What's the hardest?
I'll bet you that I was the only third baseman in the world ever to make a put out at first base.
How did you do that?
Well, it was in Washington. Guy hit one up in the air, and I could see that Sis was having trouble seeing. The sun was in his eyes, see, and he lost it. Well, sir, I ran over there, and I just missed catching it, but I got it on the bounce, and I beat the guy who was running back to first base, and I run back and tagged him at first base for a put out. That's a fact.
You tagged the batter.
Yes. He got jammed up, and I caught him before he got back to first base and tagged him out.
You played for 2 weeks with a broken finger.
Yeah, with that.
They wouldn't do that today now, would they?
I doubt it. In those days they did that.
Yeah.
We done lots of things in those days they won't do today, but
In a lot of ways, it seems like the old ball player was a lot tougher person.
I think we played more for the love of the game than they do today.
So I agree with that. That's another common thread that has come through in a couple of these interviews is, and again, remember, these interviews were recorded back in 1963, 1964. So, it's players from the first part of the century talking about modern players to them, which is still, almost 60 years ago for us. So it would be very interesting to see how some of these guys that played in the conditions they did in the Deadball era, if they were to see today's baseball game and baseball players, what their comments would be about that. I also like hearing some of the words in these interviews. Like earlier in this, Jimmy mentioned rumpus, which I don't think I have heard for 30, probably since I was a kid, so it's cool hearing some of these old phrases, expressions too, that these ball players have.
They're after that almighty dollar today. Of course, it's different.
Do you follow the ball games on TV much?
Every one I can see. Never miss. Saturday and Sunday, we get the game of the week, and I get the others on the radio.
My goodness sake, you were talking when I left and I was still going.
Yeah, 3
Apparently
weeks.
you'll be hoarse for a month. Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
And that of course, that actually was not Jimmy Austin's wife. I believe that was Larry Ritters' wife, because Jimmy's wife had died, again, preceded him in death. So, but she shows up in some of these interviews too. But again, the one thing with this interview that comes through with a lot of these players is just hearing the joy, even at the age of 84, which Austin was here, hearing the joy in their voices as they talk about playing. And again, it was by today's standards definitely archaic conditions. Unlevel playing fields, grass at different heights, no real amenities in the clubhouse. Most ball players in the dead ball era dressed at their hotel and rode to the game in full uniform and carriages, which you never go to see that obviously today. But still, the game meant so much to these guys, and it's great to hear them share these stories. And before I close here, just want to point to this image right above my head. It does show you that ball players, even back in that time, were very popular. And a lot of ball players did advertisements for tobacco products. Ty Cobb, of course, notoriously was an early investor in Coca-Cola, which made him a very wealthy man in his later years. And he did lent his name to that product as well. But this one, and because I always get curious about this stuff, I found this image of Jimmy Austin doing an advertisement. It talks about how at that point he's got 21 years in the big leagues, which would put it basically in the late 20s. So I actually went and researched. I wanted to see if I could find out which Farmers and Merchants Savings Bank this actually was. There are a few of them that still exist, so I'm thinking this comes down to one of two. One actually, and this is the one I'm leaning to, was founded in 1919, and again based in Jimmy Austin's home state of California, which is where he ended up in later years. There was another one in the areas where he would have played in the Midwest that was formed in 1901. That is still in existence, but I think this is the California Farmers and Merchants Savings Bank. So I always love running across and finding old images like this as well. And again, I will go down rabbit holes researching stuff. I did want to fact check if he hit a home run off of Walter Johnson, but was unable to find that. I'll actually look for that after this and maybe post it in the comments. But anyway, another fun interview, and another guy that I want to do for sure is Hans Lopert, also a third baseman, and a bit of a tragic story with how he ended up later in life. And this author, Larry Ritter, did an amazing job, not only with these interviews, but the compassion he showed some of these players. And when we do the Hans Lopert interview, you will definitely see that. And then I'll probably do, he's got an interview on here with Lefty O'Doul. It actually precedes this interview in the audiobook. And we'll probably do that, even though O'Doul, of course, came along and played later. He still, was toward the tail end of the dead ball years when he started. And very good interview, and O'Doul did very well for himself in the restaurant business after his playing days were over. So it's going to do it for episode number 5 of Deadball Diaries. And again, I want to thank people who joined us: David Seslinski, Bears Den 007, and Mark Jones. And guys, please hit the thumbs up button on this if you like this video, and we'll get back to doing a few more of these. And I'd like to do 7 or 8 before we wrap this up, and then maybe go into a couple of Deadball era book reviews as well. My favorite era of baseball for sure. Fascinating stories, fascinating individuals, and definitely one of the ones I am going to do is a full episode on Rube Waddell and some of the eccentricities. I've read his book. I finished it maybe four years ago, so I will go back at some point and reread that and brush myself up on all the facts, because he is a fascinating character, and would have loved to have seen him play back in the day. But thanks to everyone that joined, and Anthony with Bleacher Bums Gaming. If you enjoy this, again, subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and we'll get more up for you. Coming up this week, Thursday night fights back to the TMBU, and we will get some payoff pitch baseball back on the channel as well. Hope you all have a great Sunday and a very safe and happy 4th of July. And thank you for watching. And